Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. In today's video, I will showcase database administration best practices by demonstrating some scenarios with you in this video. So first, I'll show you some commands and steps to create a Linux VM in your Google Cloud platform and certain settings and preferences you could choose, and also use a Docker run command to create a Docker in the new VM. I'll also just further explain the benefits of Docker. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I've already created my VM, the final project, Degani. And to create an instance, you just tap on the Create Instance tab. You will then have to name your instance depending on what you'll be doing with your instance. And over here, we have different options that you could choose depending on what you'd be doing with your instance. So with my instance, I did use the small, so I chose the 2 GB memory. And just a side note, depending on the setting or preference you choose, it will affect your billing on that instance. And since we'll be working with a container, I did deploy a container with its latest image, as well as also change a bit of the boot disk settings. If you go further down, we have the advanced options. So in the management, you'll find the option of the preemptibility. So what that does is it turns off your instance when you're not using it. So you'd have to turn it back on manually, which is great in terms of cost. However, your IP external will constantly change, but you could also just keep your instance running all the time, 24/7. But like I said, it will affect your billing. And if we go back, you will then have to create your Docker container, you'd launch a SSH connection, which I've already done so. So I'll just show you a screenshot of the steps there. Oh, okay, I don't know why this thing does this. All right, so I use the Docker run command to create my container with its password and the port that I'd be creating it on. And if that runs correctly, you can run the, okay, I don't know why it's doing that. If that runs correctly, you can use the Docker PS command to check that your container has been created successfully and whether it's up and running. You also see the port over here and your container name. All right, now here is just a list of some benefits when you're using Docker. So first of all, it is flexible resource when it comes to sharing. And in terms of scalability, many containers can be placed in a single host. It is also fast deployment and its ease of creating new instances and faster migrations. There is better security, less access needed to work with the code running inside containers, and fewer software dependencies. All right, now for the second part, we have to move our chosen database, in this case, the Pokemon Final, to the new Docker in our server in the Google Cloud platform. I will also show you the connection that I made on the Microsoft SQL and how I migrated that database there. All right, so as you see here, we have the external IP address. So you could always just copy that. And if you come to your Microsoft SQL connection, I've already opened that up, so I'll just show you how you would have done that. So you'd paste your external IP, comma, and that port that I previously mentioned, and your login would be SA, and your password that you use to create your Docker container. And you click connect, and it should connect your Docker if your Docker is running. So if I expand the databases, I have already restored my Pokemon Final databases, but the steps to do that are here. Okay, I don't know why it's doing that again. Come to step 2. All right, so you would have to upload your database backup file. And once that's uploaded, you can use the ls command to check that it's been uploaded correctly. Then you'd use the Docker CP to copy that file to your Docker container as home directory. So I've already done so. And if that runs successfully, you shouldn't have any note at the bottom of that. So it'll just show your instance name. All right. Then you'd go back to Microsoft and you'd have to restore that database. When you restore it, you would restore it on the device. So I'll just show you how to do that quickly. All right, so you'd come to device, you press the 3 dots, and then you'd have to add it from the home directory. And then you click restore and it should restore your database perfectly. All right. So for the next part, we had to create 2 schemas and transfer 2 tables to the schemas. So in total, 4 tables for each schema. So 1 schema, 2 tables, other schema, another 2 tables. And then create a new login. And what I did was map that login to the Pokemon Final database and also have a user for that connection. And then we have to grant select on the first schema and grant no access for the second schema. And I'll also further explain why using schemas is a good practice. All right, so if we see here, just close that. We see here, I use the create schema to create my first schema and the second schema, final 1 and final 2. And then I use the alter statement to transfer 2 tables to the first schema and another 2 tables to the second schema. Just ignore the last statement. That's for the next example. And once I did that, I then created the login over here for the final test user. So we're just going to use the final test user to test that the select has been granted for the first schema. And for the second schema, there isn't any select permissions. All right. So here's my 2 schemas and the 4 tables. So we'll test one of each. Right. So if we select the top 1000 rows, it should show the data for that table because I've granted select rights. And then for the second table, we should see a message that says that the select permission has been denied. All right, so as we see here, the select permission was denied because I did not grant any access to that table. All right, so just to further explain why it is a good practice to use schemas. So schemas may be assigned security permissions, making them an effective method for distinguishing and defending database objects based on the user's access privileges. It also increases the database's stability for security-related management. All right. For the next part of our scenarios, we then create a view that combines 2 tables. So the first table from the schema that was granted select rights and the second table from the schema that has no access. All right, then we will just name this view the first schema. So it would be final 1 and whatever the view name is. And then we will then grant select. We will then grant that view select rights to the final test user. And once again, I'll also just further explain why using views is a great security practice. All right. So if we go back to our first connection where I created the view, expand that database, we come to views, and we see here that I've already created the final view. So that's the schema name and the view name. So I just named it view 1 for example's sake. And creating a view, you would just say new view. So this is just to show the steps you'd use to create a view. Okay, apologies, my Microsoft SQL tends to delay. All right, so it's back. So to create your view, you would add the tables that you want to combine. So like I said, I'm adding the first table from the select on the first schema, and then the second table from the schema that had no access. Once you've done that, you can close. And over here, you'll just basically select the columns that you want to show in your view. So you would just tick all of those. And then you would have to then save your view with your view name. And then once that's done, you will see your view show over there. Right. I'll just close that because I've already done that. And then just to see if that view works, you would have to grant the select rights to that view. And also just name, you'd have to transfer. So, okay, that's where I mentioned over here. So you'd use the alter statement to alter the schema and add the view 1 to that final 1 schema. And then we'll go back to the final test user to see if that view is working correctly. Okay, so over here's the view. Now, if I select the top 100 rows, we should see the data in that view. All right, so here is the data of both the tables combined. All right, and just to further explain why views would be a great security practice, views can be used as a security mechanisms by letting users access data through the view without granting the users permissions to directly access the underlying base tables of the view. So you're only allowing them to view certain parts of the data. And they can't really do much with that. They can only just see what's in that table or what's the data there. All right, and for the next part, we then had to create a database level role. And in doing so, we have to grant 3 selects. So we grant the first select on the first schema, the second select on the view that we just previously created, and a third select on a table of our choice that is not inside the schema. And then we created a new login, which is in this instance, the final running buddy, and add that person as a member in that role so that they'll be able to have select rights over the schema, view, as well as the table. Then I'll also explain why using roles is a good security practice. All right, so just to show you the code, the command that I used. So over here, I did create the role as the admin final. Then I used the alter role to add the member final running buddy to this admin final, and then granted the different select rights. So the first select right was for the table. I did change that table, so I didn't use the contest combos. I used a different table. I will show you now. If we come here, this is the third login, by the way, the final running buddy. If we expand that. Okay, once again, it's delayed. Okay, there it is. So I did grant select rights on the ability flavor text, not the test combo. So I needed to adjust that. and also grant select on the first schema and grant select on that view that I previously mentioned. And in doing so, this user, because they are now part of that role, they should be able to have select rights on these. So if I were to, for example, click on select on the first one, the data should appear. As we see here, the data appears. And also for that table, okay, the data appears. I will further explain this in a different scenario. It is the encryption. And if we go to the view, there's our view. And if we select on that view, we should also see the data there. Okay, why is it delaying? Okay, so I selected the top 100 rows for that one, as there was a delay, but we see here that the data works on the select. So just to explain the best practices for using roles, a role-based security model provides a way for administrators to control user and group access to objects that are under a defined security point within the object hierarchy. According to the role the user or group is expected to perform within the organization. All right, for the next part, this is where I explain the encryption. So we need to set a column level encryption. So I had to choose a table from, okay, so a table that the final running buddy has access to. So if I show you that now, let me just go there quickly. All right, we come here. So we would have to set the encryption on the Docker container server. So for example, I just want to show you the steps in which you'd use to create the encryption. All right, so I did use the ability flavor text. If you right click, you'll see here encrypt columns. Okay, it does delay a bit, but it should show any minute now. All right, so you'd go to column selection and you'd select the column that you would like to encrypt. So I've already done that. It was the flavor text. So I did choose the randomized encryption type and just kept the encryption key as the default. Because I've already done that, you would actually go next, and then finish, and it would set the encryption. So I'll just exit this page. Yes. All right. Now, because I've set the decryption and the final running buddy has access to that table, however, they will not be able to see that column in which I've encrypted. So if we select top 100 rows, 1000 rows, we'll see here a column where we cannot see the data or the information that's there. Over here. So the flavor text I've encrypted. So the user final running buddy cannot see the data that is over here. All right. Where companies grow at a fast rate, and in different companies, you might want to create different database copies and also future deployments. In this instance, what I would suggest is having a container. And with a container, you can have different databases loaded and restored on that container. And also a great thing about Docker is that the transportation solution for database required to run from one computer to another. So it's very easy. If someone else wants to work on that, they are able to load that container on their system without having to transfer it and there being a lot of memory use. So that is also a great option. Another thing I almost forgot to explore was to back up and restore your database, which is very important. If we come here, okay. I have already backed up the Pokemon final. So if we just right click that, there we go. Oof. All right, so if we right click, okay, and go to tasks and select backup, we should be able to have a full backup of that database and still be able to restore it. I've already done so, but I will show you the steps in which you'd use to do that. All right, so as you can see here, I already have a full backup of that database, but you would select the full backup and you need to add the location to which your backup will go to. So in this instance, that is the location. And the media options, you can select here what suits your backup. All right, so once you select OK, it should back your data. And if we go back to databases, we can restore a database. All right, so over here, you'd go to device, like I mentioned before, the 3 dots. And we'd go to add. And all right, so I saved it here. Data. Yeah. So here is the backup. And you would select that, say OK, and OK. And then once it's ready, you would click OK, and it should restore your database. Okay. All right, so once you click OK, it should restore your database. Tailbug back in. Let's just see if everything is correct. Apologies for this delay. I don't know why it's doing this. All right, we'd close any existing connection, so we'd make it a single mode. And if we click OK, so now it's restoring this database. Okay, this takes a bit of some time. All right, so it finally restored that database. And if we refresh, so once it's refreshed, we should already see, okay. Okay, let me open that. All right, so my connection stopped. I have no idea why, but that's just to summarize some of the database administration practices. Thank you so much for listening.